I'd like to start by talking about my own personal experiences in the first job I had for the United States government. I joined the Peace Corps, and I'd just gotten out of business school, and so the Peace Corps sent me to a training camp in Southern California to learn Spanish for 8 weeks. And if you speak a second language, you know 8 weeks is not a lot of time to learn a second language. And because I'd come out of business school to learn about credit and savings co-ops. This is, incidentally, not a very serious part of the speech, so if you want to crack a smile, you can do that. And then the Peace Corps sent me to Ecuador to my assignment in the Amazon. And I had to take a rickety old bus for about 2 days over the Andes. This bus was filled with goats and pigs and chickens and children and old people. And everybody on that bus, everything on that bus was vomiting most of the way, including me. But at the end, we finally get to the end of the road, and then there's like another 2-day walk into the jungle to where I'm going to spend the next 2 years. And as we're walking into the jungle, as I'm walking in, I'm practicing my lousy Spanish. And to my chagrin, I discover that the people coming out speak worse Spanish than I do. They're Shuar. They're indigenous people who speak Shuar, not Spanish. So the Peace Corps has just put me through this course to learn Spanish and sent me in to live with people who don't speak Spanish. And finally, I get into the community where I'm supposed to spend the next 2 years, and there's a couple of people there that speak Spanish, and one's a school teacher, and he tries to understand my Spanish. He comes up to me, and I say to him, "Hey, you know, I'm here to help you guys form your credit and savings co-ops." And he looks at me and he says, "You know, we don't have any money here. It's all barter. You're guinea pig for my papayas." But I grew up in New Hampshire as a Calvinist, you know, a Puritan, and if there's one thing that we're taught, it's by God, when you're sent in to do a job, you do it. And the Peace Corps had sent me in with a backpack filled with comic books in color, in Spanish, about how to form credit and savings co-ops. So you know, it's my job to hand out these comic books. So every day I hand out these comic books, and everybody takes them. And then every night I'd stand up in front of the community and talk about forming credit and savings co-ops in my lousy Spanish. And an amazing thing happened. People kept coming to hear me. More and more people every night would come in. And it reached the point that people were walking for 5 or 6 hours to get to hear me. And I did this both in the Amazon and in the Andes, and sort of a combination of these. And these people would come in. And I'm beginning to think, my God, you know, Calvinism really works. But this teacher takes me aside at some point, and he says, you know, have you looked around and noticed that there aren't any televisions in our community? There aren't any radios. There's no electricity. There aren't any magazines. Nobody can read. You're it. I was Saturday Night Live, you know. The word had gone out that this tall, skinny gringo who can't shoot a blowgun, doesn't know how to get around in the jungle. He's crying I was very depressed at this point. He's crying all the time. And he's not going to live for very much longer. So you better come see him now, you know. And at this point, I understand that my vaunted education doesn't offer these people anything. But they had a lot to teach me. And one of the most important things they had to teach me was observation and getting messages and listening to the messages that are out there. And they really listen to the messages. If a little plant is sick beside the trail, they'll often accept that as a message that they need to move the trail, stop using that trail. And then I got very, very sick at one point when I was with indigenous people. I lost about 35 pounds in a week. I was dying. And the teacher comes up to me, and he's leading this decrepit-looking old man by the hand. And he says, "This is the shaman." And I said, "Well, that's great. What's a shaman? I'm from New Hampshire, you know." And he says, "He can cure you." And the old man looks me up and down, and he says, "You're dying." And I said, "I know it." And he said, "Well, that's good, because they believe in reincarnation, and it's like, you know, you probably ought to get out of this life and move on to the next one." And at that point, And I started crying again. So he says, well, maybe you're not ready. And I said, no, I don't think I'm ready. So he offers to cure me. He says, the alternative is I could cure you tonight. So I thought I would take that. And that night he did. And what happened, he took me on what we call a shamanic journey. And that night I saw that my parents in New Hampshire had raised me meat and potatoes, don't eat onions, don't eat spices, don't eat anything that's unusual, and don't get your feet wet in the winter, you'll catch cold. And now I'm living with the schwa and I'm eating grubs that come out of trees. We're drinking this strange liquid that's, anyway, kind of a beer that's made from, anyway, never mind. But every time I ate any of these foods or drank this chicha beer, I could hear my mother saying, it'll kill you. So it was. And that night I saw in that shamanic journey that the schwa, all these indigenous people I was working with in the Quechua, were very healthy. The men are all built like Rambo, short but built like Rambo. The women are sexy and gorgeous. And so the people live to be very old, some of them. So there must be something wrong in the paradigm my mother's taught me, my parents taught me. And by just that change of paradigm, by just that change of mindset, it healed me. And the next morning, I was fine and continued to be fine. And the reason I tell this story is because I think we're at a time like that in our society. We're living on a planet that's we're a society that's very endangered, a species that's very endangered on our own planet. We have all these problems that are facing us. And what we need to do is just get a different mindset to how we look at that. I'll talk in just a minute about how I think the big corporations are the ones that are driving all of this. And we need to change the mindset of big corporations. And that takes me into the concept of economic hitman. How did we get here? How did corporations get here? What is an economic hitman? Well, we economic hitmen during the past decades have managed to create the world's first truly global empire. And we've done it for the first time primarily without the military, through economics. We work many different ways, but perhaps the most common is that we will identify a third world country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sisters, but the money doesn't actually go to the country. Instead, it goes to one of our corporations that build infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, industrial parks, highways, things that will benefit a few of the rich people in that country, as well as our own corporations. But the majority of the people don't get any benefits. They're too poor to buy electricity or to drive cars, and they don't have the skills to get jobs in industrial parks. But they and the whole country are left holding a huge debt. And it's such a big debt that they can't repay it. So at some point, we go back to the country and say, you owe us a lot of money, can't pay your debt, so give us a pound of flesh. Sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Or vote with us on the next critical UN vote, or send troops in support of ours to some place in the world like Iraq. And in that way, we've created this empire. On the few occasions when we fail, as I talk about in Secret History of the American Empire and Confessions of an Economic Hitman, I failed with Jaime Roldos of Ecuador, President of Ecuador, and Omar Torrijos of Panama. On those occasions, the Jackals come in. And these are people who overthrow governments or assassinate their leaders. So in the case of Jaime Roldos of Ecuador and Omar Torrijos of Panama, because they didn't allow me to corrupt them, to get these huge loans that would put their country deep into debt, they were assassinated by CIA-sponsored operatives, Jackals. And on the few occasions when the Jackals fail, such as in Iraq, when both the economic hitmen and Jackals fail, then and only then does the military go in. So we've created this empire in a very new way in history. And it's an empire that's been done pretty much in secret. Most of us in the United States don't realize we're the beneficiaries of an empire built on exploitation of resources and people, ruthlessly often around the world. I think we all have to question our role as a democracy under these circumstances, because a democracy is built on the assumption that the electorate is informed. And if we're not informed about this most basic principle of our foreign policy, then we're not informed. And you have to question whether we can truly vote intelligently. I think this is a very, very serious problem and an important one that we all need to face and confront. But the good news is that the modern equivalent of the emperor is not our president, obviously. An emperor is a person who does not serve a limited term, is not elected, and doesn't report to anyone. Our presidents are not in that category. But we have a group of people that I call the corporatocracy who run our biggest corporations. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. These people don't have to conspire to do illegal things, but they really control our politicians through campaign financing and especially through lobbyists. They control our media either by outright ownership or indirectly through advertising budgets, and they really run the show. They are really in charge of the world today. In fact, you might envision the geopolitics of the world today as not being revolving around nations anymore. It's not Russia or the United States or China. You could really envision it as these big clouds floating around the planet, and they don't know any national borders. These are the corporations, and they are really in control today. And in that, I think, is a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to transform the world, for us to create and force these corporations to create something different. Because unlike other empires, this one is not built on the military, therefore we don't have to fight it or change it through violence. We can do it through the way that we shop or don't shop. Because all these major big corporations are totally dependent on you to buy their goods and services. They're completely dependent on you. And in the past, they've been very, very susceptible to us, so that, we've forced corporations to clean up polluted rivers all over the country. We forced them to get rid of the aerosol cans that were destroying the ozone layer, and to open their doors wider to African Americans and other minorities, and to women, and to get rid of trans fats in their food, and to get rid of antibiotics in chickens like Tyson's recently did. We, the consumer, have forced this to happen. We've made this happen. And now we just need to ratchet that up a notch. I think we need to understand that these corporations today, the corporatocracy is driven by one goal, one single goal. And that goal is to maximize profits regardless of the environmental and social costs. Regardless of the environmental and social costs. And we need to turn that around and let the corporations know that maximizing profits is fine, but only within the context of creating an environmentally sustainable, socially just, and peaceful world. And we have the power to do that. You have the power to do that. You and I have the power to do that, and all of us together have that power. And so it's a tremendous opportunity that we have here to move into this revolution. And it truly is a revolution. I really believe that we're at a time in history now that's equivalent to when the city-states became nations. And we're now at a time where the nations are not very important. The corporations are important, and we have the power to change them. One of the reasons another reason that I'm optimistic is because every one of these corporations is run by people like you. Some of you are running some of these corporations, I'm sure. And these people have children and grandchildren and nephews and nieces. I know a lot of corporate executives and CEOs, and I don't know one who wants to see Florida sink beneath the ocean, or who wants to see the ozone layer destroyed. I know a lot of them who want to see a better world for their children and grandchildren. But they're driven by this one goal that they learn in business school and they learn as they come up through the corporation, and that is to maximize profits regardless of the social and environmental costs. When we convince them, when we go in and let them know that we're not going to buy a jacket made in a sweatshop, or we're not going to buy cars that are not fuel efficient, when we send that message to them, they listen. And one of the reasons they listen is because they really want to listen. They don't want to destroy this planet. They don't want terrorism out there. And so it's really up to us, and we have tremendous power. I think there's an amazing opportunity here for us all to participate in this revolution and create this amazing new world that will be a world of more social responsibility and environmental responsibility. And so I guess at this point, the real question comes down to, what can you do? What can each of you do? What can I do? What can we all do together? How can we move forward and really make this happen? And today we have an incredible model for that just to our south, Latin America. In the last few years, since the beginning of this millennium, 9 countries in Latin America have voted in the president who ran on an anti-corporatocracy ticket, who said, yeah. Yeah, we all need to honor these presidents. 9 presidents. They represent more than 80% of the population of South America, more than 80%. And every one of them was elected in democratic elections and peacefully. And I believe every one of them was elected by a much larger percentage of his or her population than our presidents are elected by here in this country. It's been a truly democratic revolution and a peaceful one. These presidents are saying, for example, Correa of Ecuador is saying, the profits from Ecuador's oil must go to help Ecuador's poorest people. And Morales of Bolivia is saying, the profits from Bolivia's gas must go to help Bolivia's poorest people, not just the big corporations. They're not telling the corporations they've got to go. They're simply saying, change. Take out that gas, take out that oil, and do it in environmentally and socially responsible ways, and help our people. Every one of these presidents has said, we don't want your foreign aid. We don't need your foreign aid. Just stop writing laws like NAFTA and CAFTA and the other free trade agreements that suck out our resources, that make it easy for your corporations to exploit us. Just stop exploiting us. Let us use our resources to help our people. And every one of these countries, during most of my lifetime, was run by a brutal dictator under the rule of Washington, in every one of these countries. And so this is incredibly significant, what's happened. 2 of these countries, Argentina and Chile, have women presidents. And they're amazing. Yeah. And these are women presidents that really, really honor the deep feminine principles of receptivity and nurturing. You know, they're not women posing as men. They're very, very deeply involved. And they're amazing presidents. And they, too, are great leaders in Chile and Argentina and setting this whole new precedent, because I think we must all understand that if we're to move into this new environmentally sustainable, just and peaceful world, then we all have to adopt much more of that feminine aspect. We have to move away from the old patriarchal, hierarchical. You know, if we stick with the old means, the old patriarchal methods, we may create some change, but we're going to come back in the end to something very similar. So we must honor that, and that's another thing. Not only these women presidents in Latin America, but most of the men presidents also have a very deep feminine aspects that they bring out. Another important thing that's happened in Latin America is that very diverse groups have come together. So historically, in many of these countries, the military and the indigenous people have been at war, essentially, since the time of the conquest. But now, for these elections, they came together to vote in the president that was best for their country. And I think this model is a great inspiration to all of us. It's an inspiration to Africa, to the Middle East. If these people can come together, then there's no reason why Sunnis and Shiites and Israelis can't also come together to do something better for their region of the world. There's no reason why the diverse groups in this country can't come together. It's a tremendous model. And what is your role in that model? You as an individual, all of us together here. There's so many things that we can do. You have so much power. And in Secret History of the American Empire, there's a long list of things we all can do. You know, don't buy clothes that are made in sweatshops. And let that company know why you're not buying their clothes. And let the company who you do buy clothes from know why you're buying from them, because they're not using sweatshops. You know, and don't drink water that's brought in from Fiji or the Alps. Get your local water company to do a better job. Thank you. Don't buy gas-guzzling cars, and let the gas-guzzling car companies know why you're not buying their cars. And let the other company know why you are buying their cars. And if we continue to do that, things will change. I guarantee it. If nobody buys sweatshop-made products, there won't be any more sweatshop-made products. And don't look at this as a sacrifice. If you pay a little bit more, look at it as an investment. My daughter, who's 25, just gave me a grandson. Oh, she turned 26 today. Today's Jessica's birthday. And she just gave me an 8-month-old grandson, and she did a lot of research on everything she buys for that child. And before he was born, she called me and she said, "Dad, I found a crib that's made in China. I'm pretty sure it's a sweatshop crib. And I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's $200. There's another one made from Chilean certified plantation woods, made in Canada, no sweatshops. It's $600. And she works for a nonprofit. She doesn't make much money. Money's very important to her. She said, there's no question. I'm going to pay the extra $400 because it's an investment in my child's future. It's not a sacrifice. It's an investment in our future. And sometimes some of you may not be able to afford that investment. You may have to go for the cheaper product that you know is not made socially and environmentally correctly. You just might have to. Better still would be to forego buying it. I mean, the option of not shopping is a very, very good one. You know, let's sell each other more books. That's good. Songs, dance, yoga, these kinds of things. We don't need to keep tearing apart the earth to make our economy grow. And so, you know, if you have to make that purchase that you know isn't quite right, recognize at least that you're foregoing an investment opportunity in the future. And promise yourself that when you can make that investment, you will. That's an important aspect here. The other side of all this, I think, is that we are in the process, we need to turn this economy around so that we have an economy that's based on life rather than death, rather than war. There's so many, thank you. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity here. There's so many parts of this planet that are terribly polluted. I just came back from Nicaragua, where we're trying to help organic farmers grow, small farmers grow organic produce. But so much of the land of Nicaragua has been destroyed by the big agribusinesses, Dole and Chiquita and United Brands. But there's equipment for cleaning that up. And if we would just take some of our tax dollars that go to the military today and instead pay the same companies, pay General Dynamics, pay General Motors, instead of producing tanks and missiles, let them produce equipment that can clean up all the polluted lands of the world and the polluted waters and the polluted air. Let them build equipment that can help the starving people of the world learn to feed themselves and provide mechanisms for doing that. We can create a whole economy. We don't need to sacrifice. We can create a whole economy based on life rather than death. And there's no reason that we shouldn't do that. So this comes back to you. What do you do? How do you do this? And as I mentioned, the list in Secret History of the American Empire of things that we all should be doing and can do and need to do is important, that we do those things, that we not buy the sweatshop products, that we do things that are more energy efficient, and that we shop a lot less, frankly. But beyond that, I think one of the most important things is for each one of us, for you, to recognize that you have passion and you have talents. And use your passion and your talents to move toward that road of creating, toward that destination of creating a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. My passion is writing. I hope I have some talent in it. But whatever yours is, follow it, because we're not effective unless we follow our passions. So move into your passions. And we can all take different roads different paths, but as long as they're all headed toward that destination of a sustainable, just, and peaceful world, we will get there. I'd like to close with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And it's always a little bit frightening to stand before an audience with a microphone in your hand and try to imitate Martin Luther King Jr., who came out of that front of the bus ride by Rosa Parks. So I won't try to imitate him, I'll just read it. And King said, "I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to believe that. Rather, I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." So here we are, sitting here today, about to walk out into this beautiful Chicago sunshine. And I hope as you leave this room that each one of you will make a solid commitment, deep in your heart, deep in your soul, to move forward and bring about this unarmed truth and unconditional love, to speak the unarmed truth and to show the unconditional love, and to move into constantly insisting that you and everyone around you, the corporations you shop at, the things you buy, are all headed toward creating a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. My grandson cannot possibly hope to inherit a world that any one of us would want to live in unless every child on this planet, every child born in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, the United States, North America, has that same expectation. For the first time in history, we live on a very, very tiny planet. We're one community. Our children can't hope to live a good life unless every child has that same hope and all those hopes are realized. I'm 63 years old. My grandson is 8 months. I often think about and dream about what kind of a world is he going to inherit. And I know that he's going to inherit a very beautiful world, even more beautiful than the one we have today, one where we don't have starvation, one where we don't have this terrorism, one where we don't have the desperation that causes terrorism, one where we don't have the ruthless destruction of the environment and cultures, because you and I are going to leave this room today, and as individuals and as a group, we're going to commit ourselves to dreaming a new dream, and giving energy to the dream, and that is the dream of creating an environmentally sustainable, socially just, and peaceful world. And I look forward to doing this with all of you. Thank you. Thank you.